Have you ever hit a big milestone in your life or business and you got there and you were expecting all this fanfare and joy and unlocking this peace and contentment, and instead you find yourself in the silence after hitting this big goal thinking, is that it? I thought it would feel better than this. I thought it would magically make everything more colorful, more calm, more exciting. If you have had this experience, you definitely are not alone, and you certainly are like a lot of my clients. And today I wanted to talk about this feeling that I don't think there's a really good name for. It's that feeling that by most measures, you are doing great, but there's something that just feels off. There's something that feels like it's missing, something that feels not enough, something that feels a bit superficial or surface level or boring or angsty. And the things that used to light you up, make you feel good, give you that challenge, suddenly don't do it anymore. Or you've moved through all of that challenge and now you need something new. This is the point where a lot of my clients come to me. I call it the now what, or the what next moment. And before we dive into this month's episode of the Joy First podcast, where we are looking at the sixth and final category in our Joy First audit, I want to share a few of these moments from my life with you. Now, it's really interesting because as I was taking notes for this episode, I realized that these moments have happened for me like every 4 years for my entire career. And it's almost exactly like clockwork at the 4-year mark. So let's take a little trip down memory lane and look at my career and my what now, what next moments, which is usually when I got very destructive and started burning stuff down. So the first one is in 2007, I took my little baby business and I moved it to the big city. I started my business in a cute little town called Paulsbo on the peninsula in Washington State. And I realized that for what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be, I needed to be in the city. So I moved to downtown Seattle and I set up shop there and I started sharing space with a lifestyle magazine, which was a great move and really made this huge shift in who I wanted to serve. And I made this very proactive choice to go after my ideal clients and to open myself up to more opportunity. Similarly, in 2011, I broke off an engagement. I was going to get married to a guy in Seattle, and something told me that it was not the right move for me, that I was settling, and I moved to California. The reason I moved to California is because I had a second business, Dog Eats Good, a lifestyle brand, and my business partners had moved a couple years earlier because he was a captain in the Navy and he had to go run a base down there. And I was going to move with them before I met the guy that I got engaged to. So when we broke up, it was like 100% the right move. Get to California, get to the sunshine, and start fresh, which is what I did. Now, interestingly, a year to the day later, I ended up moving to the UK, which is a whole other thing. I went to school, etc. But in 2015, so 4 years later, after having done my master's in marketing, moving to the UK, I had started a retail business and photo studio in London, and I shut it all down. My dog Olivia passed away, who had been with me since I started my very first business. I set down my camera and stopped doing photography as a service, and I started really utilizing my master's in marketing and doing more consulting and started building an online business that would give us location freedom. Now, 2019 rolls around, 4 years later. I've had my first baby. I had a business partner who left very suddenly while I was on maternity leave. I had just run a really amazing conference in London. And again, I burned it all down, moving into motherhood, and we were just about to step into COVID. So it's a good thing I did do a little bit of pivot in my business model. I started to look at everything and center again who I wanted to be and where I wanted to go. Then 4 years later, I'm at it again. I do my first brand in a week and I come back to doing design as a service, which I hadn't done since about 2015-ish time, and started doing brand in a week and started to do research for my book, Joy First, and starting to move towards this personal mission of mine, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then 2026, here we are. I'm in another big shift. I am moving into B2C, talking about joy and color out of just being purely B2B, which I have done my whole career. And I've built Citrus, which, as we all are in this AI era, includes these shifts that we're making in business, in our areas of expertise and industry, and leveraging AI to make what I do for people way more accessible and way more affordable. So, today in this episode 8 of season 4 of the Joy First podcast, we are looking at the final category in the Joy First Audit, purpose, which is about mission, it's about legacy, it's about meaning. And this is such an important part of both our lives as human beings and our businesses and brands. So I have been waiting to get my little claws into this one and chat about it with you because it is such a vital part of our existence. And I feel like now it's even more important that we're able to see this, wrap our hands around it, and really start to ask ourselves these important questions for ourselves about what does it all mean? But more importantly, what do I have to contribute that really matters to me, and how am I ideally suited to do that? This idea around meaning and purpose has just resonated so deeply and come up so repeatedly as I've been doing the research for my book, Joy First, over the last several years. But it is something I knew deeply for years and years before that, not only from my own journey, but also from my clients who I've been helping to find their why for 6 or 7 years now through a session I call Why Finding. And this is something I discovered myself in that time I mentioned where I lost my dog, I set down my camera, I realized I had started the complete wrong business for me, and I had to sit with myself and go, what the hell? I knew I had made a big mistake. I had invested a lot of money in that mistake, and I was not interested in repeating it. So I had to get really clear with myself, like, what do you actually want? What are you actually good at? What are you here to do? What can you contribute that is uniquely aligned with who you are and what you have to offer that is going to be hard for other people to compete with, but also really fueled by your own internal passion? And I had that chat with myself in 2015 and found myself moving into an online business to help other pet businesses do their marketing and branding. And that began a whole new chapter. And then I've been going through it again over the last couple of years as I've discovered my personal mission as it relates to joy, and really understanding again the areas where I have strengths, the areas where I am very unique, the skills and the passion that I have to bring to that work. And this is where I ultimately found this language and this mission and this business and book around joy. Okay, so let's dive into this conversation around purpose. I think a really good place to start, I love the science, I love the data, and so let's look at some stats around purpose and why it matters. First of all, it is a really integral part of our actual life. And when I say life, I mean longevity, how long we live, certainly how meaningful that life feels, but there's a direct correlation, it seems, between the meaning that we feel and experience and the amount of time that we actually live. So if we look to blue zones, Okinawa, Japan, or the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, which are blue zones where people tend to live the longest, there's a theme here around having a soul's purpose or a life mission. In Japan, they call it ikigai. In Costa Rica, they call it plan de vida. But ultimately, it's something that we all as humans know to be true, which is that when we have a reason to wake up in the morning, we're more likely to do that. We're more likely to stay engaged. And that engagement increases the amount of time and energy we have to live this life. Now, this is backed up by medical science as well. A couple episodes back, we talked about the Harvard study of adult development, which found that connection, relationships, was the number one indicator of longevity. But do you know what number 2 was? A strong sense of purpose. So what they found was the 2 biggest indicators of a long and healthy life were the strength of relationships and having a purpose. Now, the other thing I will add to this, because I have to, coming from the pet industry, being a dog lover, is I have seen loads of research, including from the American Heart Association, about how having a dog also makes you more likely to live longer. Of course, some of this is to do with having healthier habits, things like walking and literally needing to get up every morning to feed your dog. And there's a great relationship and connection there. But ultimately, I think there's an argument here that some of this is about purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, someone who is depending on you. After a heart attack, dog owners have a 65% less chance of dying than non-dog owners. And after a stroke, dog owners have a 27% less chance of death. So an important takeaway here, I think, is that a purpose doesn't have to be some big, massive life mission, this revolution that you're leading. It can simply be a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to put on your shoes, a reason to get out the door. Having something that needs you, having something that fills you with that joy of living, that soul's purpose, will actually help you live longer. I just watched the other night with my husband A Man Called Otto for the first time, the Tom Hanks film. Holy shit. If you've not seen this film, you must go watch it. I don't know how you missed it. I don't know how I missed it. It's been around for 5 years. But this film is so beautiful. It's masterful storytelling, and it speaks a lot to this idea around having versus not having a purpose and what that does to our desire to live. Now, for a lot of us, and I've had this conversation for years and years and years inside of business, our family, the people we surround ourselves with, do provide this purpose. They give us a reason to wake up in the morning. Our kids certainly do. The people that we care for, the people that we are connected to, can make up some of this mission and purpose. But I would argue that it's actually almost a bit dangerous to put all of our hopes and dreams in these walking around, talking, moving away from us, beings of their own free will, because we have absolutely no control over what they do, how they act, how that relationship goes over time. So for example, when I've talked to business owners, I ask them what their why is, or they're giving a presentation and talking about why they do it, and they list their kids, their family as the reason they do it all. I think that's valid, of course. Like, we give so much to our kids and they are so important to us, and we exist to make the world better for them. However, I would argue that if you are feeling like your entire purpose, your entire mission, your reason for being is your children, you have an opportunity. There is a space that will become available for something else in addition to these lovely little offspring, because once they are off doing their own thing, you might feel a bit lost. And this is what I mean about the what now, what next moment. For parents, when their kids leave the house, this is often a big one. But it can come from our businesses as well. Those of us who are so dedicated to being entrepreneurs, to doing the work that we do. I started my business in the pet industry, and almost all of my friends were women who either didn't want to or ended up not having children. And so I was a weird one when I moved over here and had kids. Many of my friends don't have kids, and that's a choice. And so their dogs and their businesses are their babies, and their purpose is connected to something different than raising small human beings, which is awesome. But I think either way, it is important that we have language to describe what it is that matters to us, and we are able to continue to get more and more clarity around what fires us up and why we exist. We are living in a time right now where a lot of people are waking up to social injustice and inequality, and that is becoming a fuel for many, many people to start getting out the door and saying something and protesting and getting activated. And that's great too, because there is plenty of injustice, and those of us who have privilege and opportunity to try and do something about it might feel compelled to do that. So this mission, this purpose can take on so many forms. And for most of us, what I found is that it's a real mix. One of the things that seems to be true from doing over 7 years now of these why finding sessions is the thing that we feel the most compelled to fix or solve or contribute to is connected to either our past pain or our current pleasure, something that we have overcome that we want to help other people avoid, or something that we have achieved that we want someone else to also experience. And this can be really, really motivating. But what I've noticed is, as business owners, when we start out, that is not what fuels most of us. Most of us are fueled by something very different. And this is where it comes back to the conversation around joy, because the opposite of joy in my conversations around Joy First Living and Working is fear and decision making around fear. And most of us, when we start our businesses and as we push them forward, it's fear that drives us. In particular, a few different versions of it: fear of failure, fear of not being able to support our family, but often it's a proving fear. We have someone to prove something to, which might actually feel quite positive, but in the end, it is a fear-fueled force that once you achieve it all, once you make that money, hit that milestone, replace your corporate salary, prove them wrong, there's not much left. You start to feel a little empty. And it's been really interesting because I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years now, and I've been in the online space for a decade. I've seen lots of coaches and mentors and gurus coming up in the space and talking about very, very specific things about how to make X amount of money or how to achieve X amount of life goals and the superficial trappings of the benefits of that. And I've watched and been a part of many of these communities where people are like, I don't care about mission. I don't care about purpose. I just want to make the money. And I get that. It's nice to feel like you have choices and freedom, which is what most of us associate with money, alongside security and stability. But what's been really interesting to me is to watch how many of these entrepreneurs, how many of these coaches, how many of these mentors are now talking about purpose. They reached these milestones, they made their money, and these are people I would have had active conversations with 5 or 6 years ago, and they're saying, don't know, purpose, don't care. It's not for me. And now they are making purpose their entire platform. And A, I love this because more people need to be shouting about purpose. And B, it so beautifully illustrates what I've seen over and over and over again, that once you're out of that proving, perfectionism, performance energy, you have to look around and go, what now? What next? Because we are creatures of meaning. We want meaning, and we want something deeper than just what, the cash, the private jets, the shoes, the holidays can ultimately provide us. So as far as the joy audit goes, let's have a quick look at the purpose section of the audit and see what questions we have around meaning, growth, impact, and legacy. Now, for me, I was very pleased to see that this was a section I scored 15 out of 15. This is an area I've been doing a lot of work for a long time, thanks entirely, really, to the personal growth I've had to do to be a successful entrepreneur and to be in a marriage and to be a parent and to just navigate life. So this is an area that I feel really strong and confident in, which is really nice. But if you would ask me this on those off cycles of those 4-year cycles, I probably would have felt a lot more lost or adrift, and I probably would answer these questions really differently. But at the moment, I am very, very aligned and very, very clear on what I'm here to do and who I'm here to be. So the questions you'll find in this section of the audit are, I feel connected to a sense of purpose. My life feels meaningful to me. I feel clear on my values and I'm living in alignment with them. I feel I'm growing or evolving. I'm often learning new things. I invest in my personal development. I take meaningful risks. My life feels like an authentic expression of me. I'm building towards a legacy I care about, etc., etc. So there are 15 questions in this category, and I think this is one of those ones that gets really put off. I will never forget when I met my husband and I moved to the UK and he was working at Samsung and I was an entrepreneur and then a student. I wasn't allowed to work when I moved here. I watched him in his job, his corporate job, go from having purpose, which I think also was some of that proving energy, because he went from being a girls football coach in America to working for Acer and really transforming their business in the projector department. And then he had a couple of other roles and he basically got headhunted by Samsung and he sold commercial monitors. So he basically sold big TVs and displays to other businesses. And when I first met him, I think he really loved this job. I think he was getting a lot out of it. I think he found it very challenging, and he was continuing to break ceilings and transform results. And I think he got a lot of fuel out of being able to do that level of performance. And at some point, a couple years in, he got shifted to a different role. It was a promotion, but he found it really boring, and he was getting paid loads of money, but it almost didn't matter because the role had so little meaning. And I remember him coming home and being like, at the end of the day, I'm just selling like boxes of plastic and glass. Like, what am I actually doing for anybody? And I think this really started to haunt him, which is why when he came home and was like, yeah, so the day we leave for our wedding, that's going to be my last day at Samsung. I'm like, great. Let's do it. Like, what are you going to do? And he transitioned into working for a cycling travel business, and then he's built several of his own, and he got to experience the wonderful roller coaster of entrepreneurship, which has so many pros and cons, right? But at the end of the day, it is extremely meaningful. And he is out there creating experiences for people that will be remembered for the rest of their lives. People celebrate their milestone birthdays. They bring family members. They have their best day ever on a bike on his trips. People have major ahas. There's a CEO of a really well-known brand that goes on rides with him and discovered on one of his rides that he didn't want to work so hard anymore, and he moved to chairman of the board and stepped out of the CEO role because he had such a brilliant time on these trips. He realized he wanted to be living his life, not stuck in an office. And these experiences are so meaningful. So not only has my husband shifted into having such an incredible purpose and being able to be so wrapped up in something so meaningful, but he's also able to deliver that to others. And it is such a joy. It's hard, right? Like, running a business is not easy. And there's probably a lot of days for both of us where we'd be like, you know what would be great? Just cashing a paycheck, just sitting back and having a holiday time, you know? But the meaning that we get from this work is so powerful that really fuels us. For me, I've been on a journey with purpose for, as I've talked about, 20 years. And when I first sat down in 2015 and did my first version of a why finding session and discovered that what I really needed was more freedom, more location independence, more time freedom, and that the areas I thought I could really serve were not aligned with what I was currently doing in the retail shop and photography, it was much easier for me to make a pivot. And at that time, the language that I found for myself was that I wanted to help entrepreneurs find freedom and fulfillment by building brands instead of just businesses. And that was true for years and years and years and years and years. And it's still true. It's still something I'm very passionate about. But over the last couple of years, the language has shifted because what I realized is there is a very specific version of freedom and fulfillment that I care about, and it is what I have labeled as joy. And I had realized that there was a very certain type of person, me included, who has grown up to be a perfectionist, a people pleaser. As we've talked about in this podcast, I recently got a neurodivergence diagnosis I wasn't expecting. And so I started to uncover the layers of masking I've been doing my whole life. Basically, the ways we perform something for other people in order to access love, acceptance, to survive at work, in school, whatever. And that fundamentally tears us down in a lot of ways. And as I've done personal growth and as I've watched my own life, and now I'm raising kids, and I've worked with so many entrepreneurs over the years in this work, I see the difference between what it looks like and feels like to be fully self-expressed and what it looks like and feels like to be performing and to be acting out a version of a life or a brand that we think we are supposed to be doing. And the second one does not bring us joy. It does not help us live a longer, healthier, happier life. It does not contribute to our relationships. In fact, quite the opposite is true. So this purpose category, this meaning, is so important. Now, the flip side of that is I've seen episodes on Diary of a CEO, and I've seen so much chat among Gen Z about, I'm supposed to have a why, I'm supposed to have a purpose, and actually I've got all this anxiety. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what my purpose is. And that's going way in the other direction, isn't it? Because this is not something that we need to tick off like a box on our resume in order to be a whole person. It's something we need to unlock and unearth and uncover for ourselves. And it doesn't have to be big. Like we talked about, it could be having a dog. For some people, it will be having a kid. And then along the way, you'll discover something else and something else and something else that really lights you up and gives you this reason for being. For me, my mission is to help co-create a joy first world. I am here to help spread more joy through color. And I want to do that in the lives and businesses of everyone I meet if possible. And I want to radicalize you to be someone who becomes an ambassador for joy and for color, because I know how contagious these things are. And in my research and in my estimation, I think joy might just be the most important thing we could invest in for ourselves and our communities and our families right now. So I am extremely motivated to write the book, to speak on stages, to do this podcast, to make my products and services more accessible so they can reach more people, to empower more people, to have those DM chats. And it's not about workaholism. It is about being fueled and driven forward by something that I feel to be true, that I know I can uniquely contribute to, and continuing to find ways to feel lit up and challenged and fulfilled and engaged and connected with human beings through this mission and purpose in a way that feels like I'm leaving something behind that is bigger than me, that is making a positive impact. So that's where I am at right now. But it wasn't until my 18th year in business that I got this language around joy first, or that I was able to use these words around joy to have this level of clarity around what I'm here to do. Does that mean my purpose before, to help entrepreneurs find freedom and fulfillment by building brands instead of just businesses, wasn't valid? No, it just means that was one stage in my evolution, one stage in me finding that clarity and finding that language and finding out who the heck I am and what the heck I think, at least right now, I'm here to do. And as part of that, I know that one of the things I'm here to do is to help build bridges. And one of the bridges that I build is to help people, especially entrepreneurs, find the language, find the connection between their big mess in their mind and the words they can use to describe this for themselves. So that is why I do offer why finding sessions. I do half-day intensives, and it is why I have built my why finding into an AI co-pilot that you can access if you get Citrus, which is way, way more affordable and totally scalable, because I obviously can't spend 4 hours with everybody who deserves to find their purpose. So those are things that are available to you based on the stuff we've talked about today in the way that I can help you go out and find this. But you don't need to start there. You can start with asking yourself some really, really simple questions. And I think many of them are in the Joy First Audit. So if you want to access that audit, you can go to Substack. And if you subscribe for free, you will get access to an analog version of the audit. If you are a paid member and it starts at like $5 a month, $50 for the year, then you can access this really cool AI tool I built to walk you through the audit, to walk you through the quiz, and to establish some really great next steps for your most important parts of the audit. Now remember, there are 6 categories in this audit. Purpose is the last and final one. Those categories are vitality, security, connection, joy, environment, and purpose. So we've covered an episode on each one of these categories. I've shared with you my score in each one of these categories, and I am going to circle back a year from now and share with you where I've got to this year by taking the audit, looking at the areas where I feel like I've got work to do, and looking at very specific ways I want to improve on those. I think it is so important if we are trying to grow, if we are trying to improve something, that we have a baseline. And this Joy First Audit is meant to be a baseline, a pulse for you to take right now, so you have not only clear next steps that you can focus on to find more joy in your life and work, but also to be able to measure and compare down the road, like where you got to, how's it going? And I think those measures are important because it is so easy to forget. I've worked with so many clients over the years, and when we start together, they are frazzled and stressed and feeling like this, that, and the other thing is so wrong or scary or broken. And 3 months later, they feel so differently that they forgot how bad it was. Sometimes like really actively forget. And I have to remind them, like, do you remember? Here's your entrance survey. Like, this is where you were at 3 months ago. And they're like, wow, I just don't even remember how bad it was. And I've had this experience as well in so many areas of my life. So the point of this is not to like capture your trauma. It's to give yourself something to pat yourself on the back for in 3 months and 6 months when you actively look at these categories and you start to chip away at them because you want more joy, because you want to live longer, because you want to be more fulfilled in your work, etc., etc., etc. Everyone's audit is going to be different. The areas of our strengths and perceived weaknesses and the areas we have more room to grow are all going to be different. And I think this is just a really helpful tool to find them and to give you some focus. Now we have finished phase 1 of my introducing you to Joy First, to the audit, and we move now into the Joy First experiments. And these are things I want to share with you that I have tried. Some I've been successful with, some I have failed at, in order to play around with how to find and live a more joy first life. And this is a place where Substack's going to really come into its own, because I'm going to be sharing some of these things with you here in this free podcast. And then there's going to be places where I'm taking you way, way deeper inside Substack, inside our community. And this is a place where I'm really hoping we can start to build some amazing conversations and some connections. I am totally new to Substack. I am totally still figuring it out, how it works and how I want to engage here. But so far, I love it. And it's a really warm, ad-free place to be. So if you're someone who's gotten a bit sick of social media, I think you might also really like finding yourself a joyful feed in Substack. I have followed a lot of artists there. So when I open the app, it is just full of art, beautiful, beautiful art, and people I really enjoy, and nothing else. So that has been really fun. I have noticed it seems like everyone's jumping to Substack in the same way that everyone's jumping to YouTube. So I'm sure there will be more of your favorite creators who will be starting to produce there. But one of the things I love about it is that it's a place where I can do a podcast, I can do a video, I can share some of my painting or sketching, I can share a quick note, I can share a long form article, and it feels really free and versatile to create. And I miss that about the early days of Instagram and blogging and some of these other platforms we had to just connect through our art and our creativity. And hopefully Substack is going to be the new place to do that. So I really wholeheartedly want to invite you over there. It's a place where I'll be investing more of my time and energy, and a place where this podcast will continue to come to life beyond these recordings, where we can chat in our threads. And I'm going to do some lives. I have made the commitment that as soon as we're up to 100 paid members, I will start doing live color calls where we will play with color once a month for our paid members. And I am really looking forward to that. So tell your friends. And as soon as we have 100 paid members, we will start having these fun color club calls. So that is what I wanted to share with you. I am really, really hoping you get a chance to go sit down and take this audit. If you find it useful, there's a playlist on YouTube of all the videos where I walk through the audit, and I think you might find it a little helpful, inspirational, and hopefully if there's an area you're feeling really strong, you get to celebrate. If there's an area where you feel like you've got a lot of improvement, maybe going and listening to the corresponding episode for that category might be helpful, and you might find some inspiration, motivation, ideas, or tips there. When it comes to purpose and our conversation for today, one of the easiest, most gentle starting points is really just to ask yourself, what is the pain that I've experienced that I would love to help other people avoid? Or what is something that I've achieved that I would love to help other people achieve? This sounds so basic, but wrapped up in the heart of the why finding, in the heart of Find Your Why by Simon Sinek, there is just this kernel, this core, this emotional resonance that comes from our desire to help, to serve. And in many cases, I have found that that is motivated by our pain and our pleasure and the ways that we want to help other people. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to start some foundation, or I'm going to dedicate my life to a convent. It can start really, really small. It can start with a garden. It can start with a writing habit. It can start with volunteering somewhere locally or in reading to kids. It can start by Googling something you're interested in and giving yourself permission to spend a little time or energy on giving back or exploring how you might help other people. And that is not just because you're supposed to. It is because as human beings, we are extremely wired to want to serve others, to be in service to others. It is a very deep root of our joy. So it is a place where when we give back, we also get in return. So if you're like, Nick, I got the kids, I got work, I got all the sports, I got the dog, I got health stuff, I get it. I get it. But what you might find is on top of all that chaos, actually finding something that gives you a deep sense of meaning will actually make all of that lift feel a bit lighter. And I say this as someone who knows, I get it. And I've been in places where I am dedicating time and energy to purpose. And I've been in spaces where I haven't. And I definitely have gotten more fulfillment, which has made me feel lighter and softer and like I have more time and energy when I am in a space that I am in a balanced level of service to others. So that's the last thing I wanted to leave you with. I hope this episode today has helped you find, choose, and share a little bit more joy. And I will see you next time as we start to dive into our Joy First experiments and I pull the curtain back on what I'm doing to try and live and work in a Joy First way. What's working, what's not working, and my advice about how to get started if any of this stuff appeals to you. See you next time.